All right, so today is probably one of the most important parts about report writing, and that is the narrative. Um, so it's called a couple different things in your book: narrative page, continuation page, that kind of thing. But basically, it is the body, the substance of the report. You no longer use boxes to fill in answers, but you use sentences to tell about what happened. So before we begin that, this week and next week you might have a little bit of trouble getting a hold of me. I will be at the State Police Academy for the next 2 weeks, but I should have internet access there. They're usually pretty good about that. Occasionally their IT person is off and something goes down, and then you just sit there and play pool all day long with fellow officers. Um, but I should be able to return emails and things like that. I'll have my cell phone with me too. In worst case scenario, I can return emails from that. So, all right. So let's talk about the narrative. Realistically, the narrative is what will determine where you stand or fall as a writer. That's directly from the book, and that's so true. You can be a phenomenal investigator. You can be one of the best there is. But if you write a sloppy and poor narrative, and you appear to be ignorant or uneducated, then you will fall as a writer. You will not people will not take what you say as gospel because they feel that you're uneducated. You don't know what you're talking about, even though you're an excellent investigator. And I've seen that happen many times. Um, Now, in chapter 4, what we see is these principles of a continuation page, a follow-up report, a supplementary report. We see all of these three types of reports kind of all put into one. And the reason for that is because all three reports have one basic common feature. They are all written in a narrative format. They are all written in a style that involves paragraphs, and a style that involves full sentences, and a style that involves just a substance instead of just filling in a box. So you'll see all three of those types put together as one, and that's the reason. Um, Now, when you're doing this narrative, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to paint a picture. And when I think about the first thing I think about when I think about that, I think about the picture of Napoleon. As a boy, I thought that picture was cool, man. Where he's kind of standing there, he got his outfit on, and it's Napoleon, you know. And but if they had just painted Napoleon with no background, would that picture have been as dynamic as it could have been? It would have still had Napoleon, and would have still had his awards and that kind of thing. But you need the whole picture to truly appreciate the portrait. And the same is true about your report. We can only put stuff in about the suspect and what reasons we think the suspect committed that crime. But if we don't paint that full picture, show the jury or the judges exactly what's happening, what you saw, what you smelled, what you felt, how many people were there. Paint them a picture because they're not there. They cannot see it. So paint them a picture in your report. Now here's an important one. Don't forget to point out facts that support the suspect having not committed the crime. If you find a blood sample that isn't the suspect's and isn't the victim's, don't admit that. If you find fingerprints that aren't theirs, don't admit that. The best example I can think of is a good friend of mine is a psychologist, and he does a lot of testifying for the Department of Justice. And one time he submitted his report. It was a not guilty by reason of insanity case, and he submitted his report to the Department of Justice. And the prosecutor called and said, "Listen, you put stuff in here that makes his case." And Doc goes, "It doesn't make his case. There are things about his life that did play into a factor in this. He was abused. He was whatever it might have been." He goes, but that doesn't mean that he was insane at the time. And the defense or the prosecutor said, you got to take this out. Just take this out. Only talk about the portion that shows that he's sane. And the psychologist said, then that wouldn't be a complete report. And I present a complete report with all my findings. He went up on the stand. He said what he had to say. The defense attorney got up and asked him some pointed questions, and he answered them. And after the fact, the defense attorney came down and he said, Doctor, I want to let you know that I was prepared to discredit you in front of the jury because our expert outlined these things that any person should put in their report. And if you had not put those in, we would have discredited you in front of the jury. But since you did, I had nothing to come back against you. And in this case, the prosecutor ended up winning that case, even though those things were in there. They were facts. It was true that he was abused. It was true that he was an alcoholic. It was true that all these things happened, but that didn't take away from the fact that he was not insane at the time or whatever. So don't take things out. Remember this: just because a suspect is a suspect does not make them a criminal in the eyes of the court. The court still considers them innocent until proven guilty. Now, who might read your report? Your book lists a great deal of people that might read your report. In particular, we'll start with, I would say, with supervisors. The first person that's probably going to read your report is either a fellow officer or supervisor, and it will go from that sergeant who has 30 years on the job up to a Supreme Court justice. And everybody in between, news media, everybody's going to read your report. So when we write these reports, keep that in mind. This report may be read in a court of law to the Supreme Court in 15 years. I've seen that happen. Now, there was something in the book called tickler file. And what that means, I've never seen this used in the version the book talks about. Basically, there's a way for supervisors to track reports and say, hey, listen, officer, you need to add the suspect's name in here. You need to do this. It's a correction. And they'd flag that report with this little card, and it would go along with they send it back to the officer, and he correct and send the report back with the card to the supervisor. Most of that's done online now. Now, if I see an issue with an officer's report, I hit the reject button, and I type in the reason I'm rejecting the report, and it emails it to the officer, and they know they need to fix it. With that said, let's talk about criticism. You've got to accept criticism in this report writing. When people criticize you, don't get offended by it. Take it as, hey, listen, this is a way for me to make my report better, a way to make me look more professional in the eyes of the court. Military time. Our office does not use military time, with the exception of our daily logs. Military time gets confusing for jurors. So in the narrative portion, our departmental policy is to not use narrative time. Now, that's up to your department. Your department may want you to use military time for everything, and that's what you need to do. But I will tell you, in the eyes of the jurors, when you're trying to read a report and then you are saying 1,500 hours and then you have to stop and translate that to 3 o'clock, it gets confusing. So we don't do it. Read over what your heading should be in your book. For instance, your first heading is always assignment and arrival. And then it gives you some other good recommendations for what headings could and should be for like burglaries and that kind of thing. And then overuse of words. I will tell you my overly used word is additionally. I start every sentence off with additionally because I want to refer them back to that previous sentence. And so I have to consciously stop myself. So make sure you understand that. Make sure you consciously stop yourself and using words that you continually use over and over again. With that said, I hope you have a good week. Feel free to email me with any questions you might have. Enjoy.